With only 2 weeks to go until voting day, the race is tight. Latest polls show Kamala Harris has a marginal lead over Donald Trump, but this is politics and a lot can change in 2 weeks. Joining me is former White House spokesperson Sean Spicer. Sean, thanks for joining me. Early voting has already begun in the US with reports 17 million ballots already cast. From what analysts are saying, early voting tends to favour the Democrats, doesn't it? Because Trump typically says early voting is a stupid idea. So Republicans tend to wait until polling day. Is that right?
Well, James, yes. Traditionally, that's been the case. Republicans tend to want to vote on Election Day. But what's going on that's so fascinating, the first day of early voting in Georgia, for example, I saw the number of the people that voted and went, oh, God, we're screwed. When you start to break down the data, though, not just in Georgia, North Carolina, Nevada, in those key battleground states, James, it's Republicans who are either outdoing and closing the gap. So what people have to understand is, yes, Democrats do better, but they normally run up a massive, massive vote advantage in early vote, and then Republicans try to catch up on Election Day. What we're seeing right now, James, throughout the battleground states, where the early voting has begun, Republicans are doing better than they ever have in early votes, and this is sending chills through Democrats.
Well, I found it interesting, and this would send some chills through Democrats as well. I imagine that the LA Times has, for the first time in 15 years, refused to endorse either presidential candidate. I would have thought that's a big blow, particularly for Kamala Harris.
Yeah, start to put the list together, James, right? It's the Muslim American groups in Detroit. There's two of them. They've refused to endorse. The International Association of Firefighters, they refuse to endorse. The Teamsters, they refuse to endorse. But what do all these groups, including the LA Times, have in common? These are normal Democrat constituencies that they count on to get their base fired up, get people turned out, to get people excited. And they're saying no to Kamala Harris. No Republican thinks that we're going to get the support of these organizations. So for Kamala Harris not to get it is a big, big deal. She is having a major problem. Look, James, I'll be honest, coming out of that first debate, I was a little worried. Kamala Harris was having a sugar high. She had the wind at her back. The media is all in for her. But what Donald Trump has done in the last 10 days to 7 days is really turn this thing around. We are going into the election with the wind at our back now. Things have really changed. As we head into these final 13 days, I'd much rather be us than them.
You know, Sean, they talk about the October surprise. Maybe the October surprise is that Kamala Harris is a much worse candidate than anybody actually thought. Another one of Kamala's problems seems to be men, a demographic Trump has really capitalised on. Is it fair to say there's a lot of frustration among men in the US who feel like the Democrats are at best dismissive and maybe even problematic for them?
Yeah, well, look, when your vice presidential candidate thinks he's trying to dress up as a man for Halloween by putting on a flannel shirt and a camo hat, men get offended. I mean, look, it's the most unauthentic ticket in modern American history. These people are faking who they are. Tim Walz looks like he walked out of a Walmart when he went to try to go do that stunt the other day and had the price tag still hanging off the clothing. Like, he couldn't figure out how to get the gun loaded. He was trying to show that he was a tough guy. He could go out there and go hunting. It's all fake. And I think men see right through it. There's a reason that the gap exists. And I would put my finger on it being authenticity. They both lack it. Men in particular see through it. We're focused on policy. We want this country to be safer and more prosperous, something that they're severely lacking in any policies for.
Joe Biden seems to be missing on the campaign trail. He seems to be missing as president, actually. When he announced he wouldn't run in this election, he gave Kamala a glowing endorsement. But since then, he's only been to 1 or 2 official campaign events with Kamala. He's done a couple by himself. I think he's doing one with Bernie Sanders either today or tomorrow. But with 2 weeks to go, Kamala and Joe are barely seen together. So who's avoiding who?
It's a great question. I think she's avoiding him. There's no question that the people in Biden world are very upset about the level of disrespect that Kamala Harris and her team has showed. It's not just Joe Biden. You rarely hear about Jill Biden, who would seemingly want the first female, the president's right-hand person, to be successful. They're not putting in the effort. I can't believe they're not using him more in Pennsylvania. It's a battleground state. I had somebody on my podcast today that said, look, we used to view Joe Biden as a third senator. He's barely been seen since he got pushed out. Why isn't he being used in Pennsylvania? I'm not in the business of giving Democrats any hints, but for goodness sake, like, I get not bringing him into every battleground state, but in Pennsylvania, they view him as a native son. For goodness sakes, use the guy. But it's an embarrassment and so disrespectful what they have done and how they have treated Biden. And my guess is that when this election is over, Joe Biden's going to say, you know what? You pushed me aside and look what happened. But I can't believe the way that the Harris campaign has treated that guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Sean, I've got to say, I wasn't expecting the contest to decide the leader of the free world to come down to who could make the best McDonald's employee, and yet that's where we are. Donald Trump decided to work the fryer at Macca's in the swing state of Pennsylvania. Take a look.
But I could do this all day. I wouldn't mind this job. I like this job. I think I might come back and do it again.
Thank you.
Look at that. Look at that. How are you?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Nice to see you.
You made it possible for ordinary people like us to meet you.
You're not ordinary.
I mean, thank you so much.
MSNBC, as you would imagine, had a meltdown over Trump working at McDonald's. Have a look at this.
There's no logic to it. It's a stunt. He has not put forth an economic agenda. He, as you know, appears to be not well, and he's engaged in some really bizarre types of activities during this campaign.
Now, this campaign line from the Harris camp, Trump is mentally unwell. Kamala Harris had another cheap shot targeting Trump's age. Here's her latest attack.
A Trump advisor told producers that Trump was exhausted and refusing interviews.
He would be the oldest president ever inaugurated if he wins in November.
He will not agree to a second presidential debate.
The former president was swaying and asked to play songs for about 40 minutes.
Donald Trump's public appearances have deteriorated.
The stomach is speaking. Many Azerasians, just like putting a million Rambos, good old Sylvester Stallone is my friend.
There is no way that this man who can't make it through an entire speech, who keeps canceling things, is going to be the person that does 4 more years.
Sean, I just cannot believe that the Democrats, after propping up Joe Biden for all those years, are now taking a shot at Donald Trump's mental acuity and age. I mean, they've got to hide.
I'm with you, James. I mean, it's kind of rich the way that they didn't have a problem with, the mental acuity of anybody or their stamina several months ago. In fact, they denied it. And now they're taking pot shots at Donald Trump, who, look, I will say the funny thing is, I always tell people that there are narratives in politics, right? Somebody is a really good fundraiser, they do hard work or whatever. No one accuses Donald Trump of not being active enough. In fact, I would argue a lot of people say, I wish you would tone it down. Like, I work for the guy. You can't keep up with him, and I'm a third of his age, right? I mean, this is a guy who's up first thing in the morning, well past midnight every night. Like, the idea that anyone thinks he has a stamina problem is laughable. So they're trying to cut against a well-laid narrative, and that's the problem. And I find it rich coming from Harris, who was the primary cover-upper of what happened with Biden.
Yeah, very good point. Well, Sean Spicer, always enjoy catching up with you. The next 2 weeks are going to be fascinating. Thanks for joining me tonight.
You bet, James. Thanks, sir.